Before I begin, I'd like to just give a nod to one of my wonderful seminary professors, Dr. Christopher Morse. He convinced me to take seriously verse 15b from 1 Peter chapter 3, which reads, "Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is within you." Amen. When Donna called me yesterday and asked me to preach today, I thought of that verse and thought, well, okay, Judson ordained me. Here we go. So what follows is a meditation for Judson, rather hastily prepared, on the subject, the title that is in your bulletins, Solitary. Be still and know that I am God. We know we live in a fast-paced, congested, and distracting environment. Whether we're talking about the internet or the pace of New York City, the energy is high and demanding, and sometimes dangerously so. Too many of us still text and drive, text and talk, and cross the street with our eyes on the screen. We multitask too much. What's more, our culture is filled with numbing self-interest and self-deception. If we are honest, we can admit that what we are quick to criticize also lives within us. And I dare say that many of us come to Judson for an antidote to all that stress. But a peaceful, focused, and non-anxious mind is still hard to come by, not just here, but all over. Such is life in our day. Be still and know that I am God. Indeed. Now, believe it or not, in the 3rd century of our common era, many people felt a similar need to cope with a culture filled with distractions and lies. Christianity, which for 300 years had been not only countercultural, but also illegal, was becoming accepted. In the 4th century, thanks to Constantine, it became established as the religion of the empire. Many Christians found the turbulence of the times to be too much, and seeking spiritual integrity, all kinds of believers, wealthy and poor, farmers and city dwellers, left their homes to live in the deserts of Egypt, Sinai, and what became Palestine, Syria, and Turkey. These people became what we now call the Desert Fathers and Mothers, and they were the forebears of monastic Christianity. Christine Paintner, one of my sources, characterizes the movement this way. Leaving behind the inhabited world became a new form of martyrdom. Those who had been killed under Roman persecution were part of what was known as the Red Martyrdom. Once Christianity became legal, those who retreated to the desert were part of what was called White Martyrdom, a movement in conscious resistance to the co-opting of Christian values as a way to hold up the power system. I'd like to repeat that last part. A movement in conscious resistance to the co-opting of Christian values as a way to hold up a power system. Those who went to the desert called themselves monks. The word originated from a Greek word for solitary, or single. And solitary is what we're about at Judson this morning. Solitary means the state of being alone, without companions. And of course, we often think of solitary in its connection to that horrific and sadly common practice of locking up prison inmates by themselves for long periods of time. Solitary confinement. Outside the prison context, however, we each have our own take on what it means to be solitary. Being alone can be almost intolerable for extroverts, and for introverts, it offers blessed peace, at least for a while. For the desert mothers and fathers, being alone was a means to an end. In the solitary state they chose, they were better able to attend to their own inner struggle and growth toward wisdom. Their solitary lifestyle offered them a powerful path to God. The desert monks would seek out a spiritual elder and say, "Give me a word." The resulting wisdom, shared by desert mothers, also known as ammas, and fathers, known as abbas, was usually in short messages, stories, or parables. What survives from this essentially oral tradition has been recorded and collected and can be read today. And despite vast differences in time and culture, the desert wisdom has a word for those of us trying to free ourselves from distractions and attend to what really matters. Our own struggles, like those of the ancients, are ongoing, both internally and externally. We all have wild inner landscapes with some harsh desert places where we are deeply vulnerable. And it is not easy to consciously resist the co-opting of our values in support of the dominant power structure. Put another way, don't we too struggle to keep from perpetuating racism, patriarchy, and so many other systems that are truly not of God? The landscape can be harsh for us in many, many ways. But my source, Christine Paintner, says, the desert is an archetypal experience, one that transcends geography and physical location. Now, I must own the fact that I am more a student than an authority on the wisdom of the desert mothers and fathers, but nonetheless, I do have some observations to share with you from what I have learned. The first one has to do with the desert itself. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, this was unquestionably a place of terror. Harsh and arid land, wild animals, hostile tribes, and other dangers threatened the monks at every turn. In the desert, one was very vulnerable. These people risked their lives. But there was also a kind of peace that seemed to arise from living there. Consider this quote from Andrew Harvey. "The things that ignore us save us in the end. Their presence awakens silence in us. They refresh our courage with the purity of their detachment." Have you ever found yourself in a place where you could feel the power of creation all around you and know that it was not and never would be about you? I think of times I have been in the Rocky Mountains or have stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon. In another sense, I think of the inexorable growth and development and departure of my children, the deaths of my parents, my own failures, and even, at some point, my own death. I have found grace in staying attentive to them and what they teach, not turning away. Be still and know that I am God, or we might say that God is God. The second observation I have is that these ancients chose the desert path not as an escape, but as a way into a deep and transforming encounter with the sacred. They freed themselves from the distractions and pretensions of their former lives, not so much to get away, as to live lives of greater integrity. The process was one of waking up, becoming attentive, I was very aware of this in last week's service when Michael led us through a meditation practice. He asked that we sit in a posture of a relaxed attentiveness with our eyes open. I wanted so much to close my eyes and just rest, and I did a little, but not always. It may seem a small thing, but there is a big difference between closing your eyes to the world to rest and quietly, in solitude, staying alert to whatever may come. So consider this piece of wisdom from Abba Moses, a desert father. Not the Moses, of course, but another one. A brother came to Cetus to visit Abba Moses and asked him for a word. The old man said to him, "Go sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." There is a big difference between getting away and deliberately choosing a path of simplicity and devotional practice in spite of its inconvenience and discomfort. So these Ammas and Abbas challenge us to wake up to what is really important, really sacred, and to what prevents us from seeking it. My third observation, that is, in seeking out one or more spiritual elders, the desert mothers and fathers did not, in fact, live utterly solitary lives. They certainly did not believe that they alone could find the truth. In fact, the desert attracted so many people that over time communities formed, eventually becoming monasteries. One of the most well-known, the Benedictines, sprang from this early desert movement, guided by the rule of Saint Benedict, their founder. The desert tradition did not reject human relationships so much as it focused on the believer's fierce and uncompromising search for God. We need to give up the distorted notion that we are ultimately alone and recognize that being solitary, and I emphasize voluntarily solitary, is not a sign of who we really are, but a way of caring for our souls. Human beings have always been deeply social. We come from human relationships and cannot survive, literally cannot survive, without them. To deliberately choose to forego human companionship as a way to seek the sacred is more sacrifice than escape, and it's difficult to do. So at this point, let us reflect on the acute psychic pain of those who are forced to live in solitary confinement in our prisons. This form of solitary is punishing and wounding in the extreme. Though some may feel God's presence even there, we must never confuse such prison practices with the voluntary desert way. Well, I hope you won't think that I'm making some weird request that we all imitate the extremes of the desert traditions in any literal way. Not at all. My aim this morning is to encourage reflection on it, to allow its wisdom to nourish us. In the end, it is more about love than anything else. As one writer put it, the spiritual life for the elders cultivated the capacity for greater and greater love, service to others, and a more profound sense of inner stillness. I'll conclude with this wisdom from Abba Agathon. Abba Agathon said, "If I could meet a leper, give him my body and take his, I should be very happy. That indeed is perfect charity." It was also said of him that coming to the town one day to sell his wares, he encountered a sick traveler lying in the public palace without anyone looking after him. The old man rented a cell and lived with him there, working with his hands to pay the rent and spending the rest of the money on the sick man's needs. He stayed there 4 months till the sick man was restored to health. Then he returned in peace to his cell. Be still and know.